Years after leaving his hometown, he returns, now unrecognizable. The past torments him, but the opportunity for a reckoning lies before him. What will he do when he encounters those who marked him forever? Welcome to the channel. Before we begin, like and subscribe so we can continue creating stories like this one. The fine rain fell over Boston, typical of those autumn afternoons that seemed made for reflection. Nathan Miller looked through the window of the taxi, taking him from Logan International Airport to his hotel downtown. After 15 years away, he was back in the city that had been the scene of his most painful adolescent memories. "First time in Boston?" asked the taxi driver, trying to make conversation. "No, I grew up here," replied Nathan with a restrained smile. "But it's been a long time since I've been back." The man in the back seat was no longer the same person who had left that city. At 32, Nathan was now a successful technology entrepreneur, owner of a startup valued in the millions. His athletic physique, the result of years of disciplined gym work, bore no resemblance to the obese teenager who had suffered bullying at Boston Latin School, one of the most traditional schools in the city. The invitation to the class reunion had arrived by email 2 weeks ago. His first impulse was to delete the message immediately. Why revisit a past he had worked so hard to overcome? But something inside him, perhaps the need for closure, perhaps curiosity to see what time had done to his former classmates, had convinced him to accept. Above all, he wanted to know what had happened to her. Emily Parker, the most popular girl in school, captain of the cheerleading squad, and, coincidentally, the person who had humiliated him the most during those years of torment. Look at the fat boy trying to run. Nathan could still hear her voice, crystalline and sharp as glass, during physical education classes. Doesn't he realize how ridiculous he looks? The laughter that followed seemed to echo through the empty corridors of his memory. He remembered keeping his eyes fixed on the ground, pretending not to hear while his face burned with shame, and his eyes filled with tears that he refused to shed. The taxi stopped in front of the hotel. Nathan paid the fare and entered the elegant lobby. His room had a view of the public garden, one of the city's landmarks. He dropped his suitcase on the floor and walked to the window. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and the sky, with that peculiar blue that only Boston seemed to have. He took out his cell phone and opened the email with the invitation again. The reunion would be the following day, at a restaurant in Back Bay, an upscale area of the city. There was a list with the names of former students who had confirmed their attendance. He scrolled down the screen until he found Emily Parker. His heart gave a little jump. She would be there, the girl, now woman, who had made him feel like nothing, the same one who had organized a vote among classmates to elect the class pig and had made sure to announce the winner during recess. Nathan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He was no longer that boy. After his family moved to New York in his senior year of high school, he had sworn to himself that he would transform, and he had kept that promise. First came the change in diet, then physical exercise. With each pound lost, he gained not only a different body but also confidence. He enrolled at NYU, graduated with honors in computer science, and while still in college, developed an app that caught the attention of investors. Professional success came accompanied by a complete transformation. Aesthetic treatments, elegant clothes, and a posture that emanated confidence. The mirror now reflected a man who would never be the target of jokes about his appearance. He sat on the hotel bed and opened a folder of old photos on his laptop. He found one from his last year in Boston. In the image, an obese teenager wearing baggy clothes in a futile attempt to hide his body looked at the camera with sad eyes. Next to it was a recent photo, the same man, now unrecognizable in a well-tailored suit, smiling confidently during the launch of his company. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Marcus, his best friend from college days and current a business partner. "Hey man, already arrived in the city of cold and prejudice?" Nathan laughed. He had told Marcus about his past and the real reason for accepting the invitation to the reunion. "I'm here, at the hotel now." "And how are you feeling?" "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to show everyone how I've changed, especially her. Another part thinks that's childish and that I should simply move on. Look, Nathan, you're not going there to get revenge or rub your success in anyone's face. You're going to close a chapter, to make peace with your past. Nathan knew. His friend was right. It wasn't about revenge, it was about liberation. For years he had carried the weight of those memories, of the cruel words, of the looks of contempt. Perhaps it was time to leave all that behind. You're right, he agreed. Anyway, it will be interesting to see how everyone is after so much time. After hanging up, Nathan decided to take a walk around the city. He wanted to revisit some places before the big meeting. He grabbed a light jacket and went out. Boston's fresh air greeted him like an old acquaintance. He walked to Boston Latin School, which remained practically unchanged. He stopped in front of the main gate, watching the students leaving after classes ended. Carefree teenagers, some in noisy groups, others walking alone, absorbed in their phones. Was there someone among them going through what he had gone through? A boy or girl suffering in silence from the cruelty of classmates? A knot formed in his throat. He moved away from there and continued his walk through the city. He passed by Faneuil Hall, where he used to hide in the movie theater on weekends to avoid boredom and loneliness. He crossed the historic district, with its old buildings and cobblestone streets. When he realized it, he was in front of a small bakery in Beacon Hill. This was where he used to come with his mother on special days to eat the famous dulce de leche donuts, one of the few places where he had happy memories. To his surprise, the bakery still existed. He entered and sat at a small table in the corner. A waitress approached to take his order. "A dulce de leche donut and a coffee, please," he requested, feeling a strange emotion as he pronounced those words. While he waited, his cell phone vibrated. It was a notification from the class reunion. First, Emily Parker just posted a message to the group. "Can't wait to see everyone tomorrow. So many good memories to revisit." Nathan felt a chill in his stomach. Good memories for her, perhaps. He put the phone back in his pocket and tried to push those thoughts away. Tomorrow would be a new day, and this time he wouldn't be the same Nathan everyone had known. The next morning dawned sunny, a rarity for Boston at that time of year. Nathan woke up early, his morning routine unchanged even while traveling. 30 minutes of exercise in the room, followed by a long shower and a balanced breakfast. While eating, he mentally reviewed the events that had led him here. After moving to New York, the first year had been difficult. The new school, although without the bullying history of the previous one, presented a different challenge: anonymity. Nathan was just another shy and obese student, practically invisible. But there was something liberating about this invisibility. It was during this phase that he met Coach Richard, a physical education teacher, who, noticing his isolation, invited him to participate in an after-school project. "It's not about losing weight, Nathan," the coach had explained. "It's about feeling good about yourself, about building strength, both physical and mental." Those words marked the beginning of his transformation. First came small changes: walking more, drinking water, reducing sodas. Then came regular training, consultations with a nutritionist, and most importantly, sessions with a psychologist who helped him understand that his worth was not tied to the number on the scale. But now, sitting in that hotel room, Nathan wondered if he had really overcome everything. If the simple fact of being there, hours away from seeing Emily, wasn't proof that those wounds were still open. His phone vibrated with a message from Tyler, one of the few classmates with whom he had maintained some contact over the years. I'm picking you up at 7 p.m. Don't you dare back out." Nathan smiled. Tyler had been one of the few who had tried to approach him during those difficult years. They weren't exactly friends in school. Tyler was part of a more popular group, and although he had never participated in the teasing, he had never intervened to stop it either. Years later, when they ran into each other by chance at a technology fair in New York, Tyler had made a point of apologizing for his omission. "I should have done more," he had said. "I knew what they were doing to you was wrong, but I was afraid of becoming the next target." Since then, they had maintained sporadic contact. It was Tyler who had convinced him to attend the reunion, assuring him that people had changed, matured. Nathan decided to take advantage of the day to work remotely. He had a video conference with investors at 2 p.m. and some important emails to respond to. Concentrating on work had always been his refuge when anxiety hit. The afternoon passed quickly, and soon it was time to get ready for the event. He carefully chose what to wear: navy blue dress pants, a white shirt, a well-cut blazer, and Italian shoes. He looked in the mirror and adjusted his posture. The man who stared back seemed confident, successful. At 7 p.m. sharp, he received a message from Tyler saying he was at the reception. He took a deep breath, grabbed his wallet and phone, and went down. "Man, you look incredible," exclaimed Tyler upon seeing him, giving his friend a tight hug. Tyler continued with the same expansive manner as always, although now he was a respected lawyer in Boston, married with 2 children. On the way to the restaurant, they caught up. "How's Amanda?" asked Nathan, referring to Tyler's wife. "She's great. Really wanted to come tonight, but she's at a medical conference in Chicago. And you? Anyone special in your life?" Nathan smiled slightly. His last serious relationship had ended almost a year ago, when he realized his girlfriend was more interested in the successful entrepreneur than the man behind the achievements. "At the moment, I'm focused on the company. We just closed a massive international contract and things are intense." Tyler nodded, respecting his friend's diplomatic response. After a few minutes, he decided to address the subject hanging in the air. "She'll be there tonight, you know." Nathan swallowed hard. "Emily?" "Yes. She moved back to Boston about 3 years ago after the divorce." "Divorce?" Nathan couldn't hide his surprise. "She married Jack Reynolds right after college. Remember him? Played on the basketball team." Of course Nathan remembered. Jack was one of the popular guys who laughed at Emily's jokes, although he had never been one of the instigators. "The marriage lasted what, 5, 6 years?" continued Tyler. "From what I heard, he left her for a younger model. Classic." Nathan felt a twinge of satisfaction upon hearing that, immediately followed by guilt. He didn't want to be the kind of person who rejoices in the misfortune of others, even if it was someone who had hurt him so much. "And how is she?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Tyler shrugged. "Working as a marketing manager at a cosmetics company. Seems to be recovering well from the separation. But you know how Boston is, small city. It's not easy to start over when everyone knows your story." The car parked in front of the restaurant, an elegant establishment in the heart of Back Bay. Through the large windows, Nathan could see that the event had already begun. Groups of people were animatedly chatting, wine glasses in hand, laughter and hugs being exchanged. "Ready?" asked Tyler, looking at his friend with genuine concern. Nathan nodded, adjusting his blazer one last time. "Let's go." As they entered, they were greeted by Megan Castro, the event organizer and former student council president. She hugged Tyler effusively, and for a moment seemed not to recognize Nathan. "Oh my God. Nathan Miller," she exclaimed when he introduced himself, her eyes widening in surprise. "You look completely different." Nathan smiled politely as she led him through the hall, introducing him to former classmates who reacted with the same mixture of shock and admiration. Some seemed genuinely happy to see him, others were clearly embarrassed, perhaps remembering their own role in the years of torment. And then, across the hall, he saw her. Emily Parker was talking with a small group. She wore a simple but elegant red dress, and her dark hair, now shorter, framed a face that, despite the years, remained beautiful. Nathan felt his heart race. Years of therapy and self-development suddenly seemed insufficient in the face of that sight. The memories came back in an avalanche. Emily laughing as he tried to change in the locker room after swimming class. Emily imitating his heavy walk through the corridors. Emily organizing a fake intervention where her friends surrounded him to say how much his presence bothered them. "Are you okay?" whispered Tyler, noticing the change in his friend's expression. Before Nathan could respond, Megan, who was still accompanying them, caught Emily's attention. "Em, look who's here." Emily turned, and her gaze met Nathan's. For a moment, there was no recognition in her eyes. Then, slowly, understanding dawned on her face, followed by an expression that Nathan couldn't fully decipher. Surprise, certainly, but there was something more there. Embarrassment? Remorse? She approached hesitantly. "Nathan?" Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Nathan Miller." He nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "Hello, Emily. Long time." She stared at him, apparently at a loss for words. The silence between them seemed to stretch for an eternity, while the buzz of the party continued around them. "You look," she began, but couldn't complete the sentence. "Different," he suggested, with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, a lot has changed in 15 years. Emily nodded, still seeming dazed. "I heard you've become a successful entrepreneur," she said finally. "Your name appears in business magazines sometimes." "And you?" he asked out of politeness. "How have you been?" She hesitated again. "Good. Working a lot. I moved back to Boston after some changes in my personal life." The divorce, thought Nathan, but he didn't comment. At that moment, a waiter passed by offering glasses of wine. Nathan took one, grateful for the interruption that broke the discomfort of the moment. Emily also accepted a drink, and her fingers trembled slightly as she held the glass. "I think we should toast to the reunion, right?" she suggested, with a hesitant smile. Nathan raised his glass politely, but before he could respond, they were interrupted by a group of former classmates who approached, exclaiming in surprise as they recognized him. Soon they were surrounded, and the private conversation gave way to group reminiscences, questions about career, family, and the inevitable comparisons about who had changed the most over the years. Throughout the conversation, however, Nathan could feel Emily's gaze upon him. There was something in those eyes, which had once observed him with such contempt, that now seemed to plead for something. A chance, perhaps? A private conversation? While answering questions about his company and feigning interest in what had happened to the school volleyball team, Nathan wondered, what would he do when he finally found himself alone with the woman who had hurt him so much? Would he be able to forgive? Or better, would he be able to simply move on without the past having any power over him? The night progressed, and the relaxed atmosphere of the reunion contrasted with the storm of emotions inside Nathan. Outwardly, he maintained his composure, conversing politely, distributing business cards when requested, answering questions about his professional trajectory. Inside, he fought against memories that insisted on resurfacing each time his gaze crossed with Emily's. At one point, the event organizer suggested that everyone sit down for dinner. Nathan observed with a touch of irony that his name was at the same table as Emily's. Coincidence or the work of some well-intentioned former classmate trying to promote a reconciliation? Tyler, sensing his friend's discomfort, offered, "I can ask them to change it if you want." Nathan shook his head. "No, it's fine. I've faced worse things." The meal proceeded amidst trivial conversations and memories of school days. Each time someone mentioned a funny story from that time, Nathan noticed Emily's apprehensive look in his direction, as if she feared he might reveal the dark side of those memories. But Nathan remained silent about the bullying he had suffered. Not out of shame, but because he had learned that revisiting that pain served no constructive purpose. "So Nathan," began Gabe, former captain of the basketball team and now a renowned doctor in Providence, "tell us how this transformation happened. Last time I saw you, you were..." He stopped, clearly not knowing how to complete the sentence without sounding offensive. "Obese and insecure," completed Nathan, without showing discomfort. "It's true, I weighed almost 290 pounds when I left Boston." The table fell silent. No one was prepared for that frankness. The change began when I understood that my weight was just a symptom, not the cause of my problems, he continued, surprising everyone with his openness. "In New York, I found people who helped me build a healthier relationship with myself." Emily kept her eyes fixed on her plate, moving the food around without really eating. "It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight," Nathan went on. It took years of work, both physical and emotional. The hardest part wasn't losing weight, but learning to like myself. Well, the result is impressive, commented Caroline, who was sitting across the table. You look great. There were murmurs of agreement, and Nathan thanked them with a polite smile. The conversation soon shifted to other topics, to his relief. After dinner, while some headed to the bar for another round of drinks, Nathan decided he needed a moment alone. He found an outdoor terrace, almost empty due to the cold Boston air. He leaned on the railing, watching the city lights. He didn't notice Emily's presence until she spoke. "May I join you?" Nathan turned, surprised. She was standing a few steps away, arms crossed against the cold, a vulnerable expression he would never have associated with that confident girl he had known. "Sure," he replied, turning back to look at the landscape. She approached, standing beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. "You hate me, don't you?" she asked after a few moments of silence. The question caught him off guard. He had expected apologies, perhaps justifications, but not that direct confrontation. "No," he answered honestly. "I did hate you for a long time. But I realized that feeling only hurt me." Emily nodded slowly. "You have every right to hate me," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "What I did, there's no justification." Nathan looked at her, really looked, for the first time that night. The years had left subtle marks, small wrinkles around the eyes, a certain melancholy in her gaze that didn't exist in the carefree teenager he had known. Even so, she remained beautiful, although in a different way, more mature. "Why did you do that?" he asked, the question that had haunted him for years. Emily took a deep breath, as if seeking strength. "I don't have an answer that makes sense, Nathan. At the time, I convinced myself it was just teasing, that you needed to get a clue, and that we were doing you a favor by provoking you." She shook her head, disgusted with her own words. "Now I realize how absurd and cruel that was." "It was. More than teasing," he pointed out without aggression, simply stating a fact. "It was systematic humiliation. You organized it, Emily. You planned ways to make me feel inferior." She didn't deny it, her eyes filled with tears that she struggled to contain. "I know, and there isn't a day that I don't regret it." They were silent for some time, only the sound of the wind and the muffled music from the hall filling the space between them. "There were things happening in my life that you didn't know about," she continued finally. "My father, he was a violent man. At home, I was the target of his anger. At school, I sought control, power. Making others feel small made me feel big for a few moments." Nathan observed her, divided between empathy for the girl who had suffered abuse and the memory of the teenager who had been a victim of the consequences of that suffering. "I'm sorry for what you went through," he said sincerely. "No one deserves to live in fear in their own home. But you know what? I didn't deserve what I lived through at school either." "I know," she replied, a tear finally escaping. "And if I could go back." "We can't go back," he interrupted gently, "but we can move forward." At that moment, they were interrupted by a small group leaving for the terrace, laughing loudly, champagne glasses in hand. The moment of intimacy was broken. Emily discreetly wiped away her tears, and Nathan adjusted his posture, returning to his social persona. "I think I'll go inside," she said. "It's getting cold out here." Nathan nodded, remaining where he was. Before moving away, however, Emily hesitated. "Would you be willing to have coffee with me tomorrow?" she asked, her voice betraying her nervousness. "There's a lot I'd like to tell you, but I don't think this is the ideal place." Nathan pondered for a moment. Part of him wanted to close that chapter right there, leave the past in the past, and return to New York with a sense of duty fulfilled. But another part, perhaps the wiser one, knew that some conversations needed to happen for the cycle to truly close. "All right," he agreed. "I know a cafe in the historic district. We can meet there at 10 a.m. She smiled slightly, a smile without the arrogant shine of before, just relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Nathan. See you tomorrow, then." After she left, Nathan remained on the terrace for a few more minutes, digesting the conversation they had just had. He had never imagined that Emily could have been a victim of domestic violence. That explained a lot, although it didn't justify her actions. When he returned to the hall, the party was at its peak. Tyler approached, concerned. "Everything okay? I saw you talking with Emily out there." "Yes, we're talking," replied Nathan. "We're going to meet tomorrow for coffee." Tyler raised his eyebrows, surprised. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Nathan shrugged. "Honestly, I don't know. But I think we need this conversation, both of us." The rest of the night passed without major events. Nathan avoided being alone with Emily again, although their gazes occasionally crossed across the hall. When the party began to disperse around midnight, he said goodbye to his former classmates and took a taxi back to the hotel. On the way, he received a message from Emily confirming their meeting the next day. It was simple and direct. "Thank you for the chance. See you tomorrow." Nathan stared at the phone screen for a few moments before putting the device away. He didn't respond to messages while in a taxi, a habit acquired after years of discipline with small rules he had created for himself. But that message accompanied him throughout the journey. Upon arriving at the hotel, he sat on the edge of the bed and reflected on what had happened that night. The reunion with Emily had been less cathartic than he had imagined, but also less painful. Instead of the silent revenge he had secretly planned, showing himself successful and indifferent to her presence, he had ended up involved in something more complex and human. He took out his travel diary and noted, "Today I understood that even those who hurt us carry their own pain. It doesn't mean we should accept the harm they did to us, but perhaps we can understand that the world rarely divides into villains and heroes." He fell asleep thinking not of the past, but of the meeting the next day, and what might emerge from that conversation. Postponed for 15 years. The family bakery was practically empty at that hour of the morning. Nathan arrived 10 minutes before the agreed time, choosing a corner table with a view of the cobblestone street. The place maintained its old charm, with marble tables, dark wooden chairs, and the unmistakable aroma of fresh coffee and freshly baked bread. While waiting, he checked his emails on his cell phone. There were some urgent work messages that he quickly responded to, grateful for the distraction. In recent years, immersing himself in work had become his safe refuge when emotions threatened to overflow. At exactly 10 o'clock, Emily crossed the bakery door. She wore jeans, an olive green blouse and a light jacket. Her hair was tied in a messy bun, and she wore little makeup, a very different version from the adolescent who used to be impeccably produced or the elegant woman from the night before. Their eyes met, and she walked towards the table, hesitantly. "Good morning," she greeted with a nervous smile. "I hope I'm not late." "Punctual as always," replied Nathan, briefly standing up to greet her. "Would you like to order something?" A waitress approached, and they both ordered coffee. Emily added a piece of apple pie, mentioning it had always been her favorite to that place. "You used to come here?" asked Nathan, surprised. "Yes, with my grandmother. They were the only moments of peace I had." She paused, as if deciding how much of herself she would reveal. She was the only one who knew what was happening at home. Nathan nodded, giving her space to continue if she wanted. The silence between them was no longer as uncomfortable as the night before. "Thank you for coming," said Emily finally. "I know it couldn't have been easy to accept this meeting. I confess I hesitated," he admitted, "but I think we both need this conversation." The waitress brought their orders, creating a brief pause. Emily sweetened her coffee meticulously, stirring, with the spoon for longer than necessary. "Where to begin?" she murmured, more to herself than to Nathan. "How about the beginning?" he suggested gently. "Yesterday you mentioned your father." Emily took a deep breath. "My father was an important man in the city. Politician, respected businessman. Everyone admired him," her eyes fixed on the coffee cup. "At home he was a different person, controlling, violent. My mother suffered for years before finally abandoning us, my younger brother and me." She paused to take a sip of coffee. "When she left, I was 14. He channeled all his anger towards me, not with physical violence, but with something perhaps worse. He constantly destroyed my self-esteem, made me feel that I would never be enough. He said I would end up like my mother, alone, a failure, abandoned. Nathan listened attentively, beginning to understand the girl behind the mask of cruelty. At school, I had created this persona, popular, confident, untouchable. It was my form of protection, of compensating for what I felt at home. She looked directly at Nathan. And you somehow represented everything I feared becoming, someone vulnerable, an easy target. Nathan felt a lump in his throat, the memories of those years resurfacing with full force. At home, I was the victim. At school, I didn't want to feel that powerlessness, she continued. So I transferred all the anger and insecurity onto you. Each provocation, each humiliation that I imposed on you was a way of feeling in control, of pushing away my own fears. Emily stopped, her eyes watery. I'm not looking for justifications, Nathan. What I did was unforgivable, and I know that. Nathan remained silent for a few moments, processing all of that. Part of him felt compassion for the terrified adolescent Emily had been. Another part still carried the emotional scars from those years. What happened after I left Boston? He asked finally. I continued the same for some time. Graduated in business administration. Started working at my father's company. Married Jack right after college. She gave a sad smile. The perfect marriage, everyone said. Few knew I had chosen a man exactly like my father. Nathan raised his eyebrows, surprised. Jack was controlling, manipulative. He wasn't physically violent, but he knew exactly how to make me feel insignificant. Emily poked at the pie without really eating it. I was repeating patterns without realizing it. On the outside, we were the ideal couple. Successful, good-looking, envied. Inside, I was drowning. I'm sorry, said Nathan sincerely. The divorce was a scandal, of course. He traded me for a 22-year-old model whom he now displays on social media like a trophy. My father took his side, obviously, she shrugged. But you know what? It was liberating. Emily explained that after the divorce, she sought therapy for the first time. It was a painful process, but necessary. It was there that I began to understand the destructive cycles I was repeating, and also the harm I caused to other people. She made a significant pause. You were always at the top of that list, Nathan. I looked for you several times in recent years, but you had completely disappeared. It was intentional, he admitted. When I left Boston, I decided to cut all ties, new place, new people, new beginning. Emily nodded, understanding. When I heard about this class reunion, a part of me hoped you would show up. I wanted to have the chance to personally tell you how much I regret it, even knowing that words don't undo the past. Nathan observed the woman in front of him, so different from the cruel teenager who populated his memories. Time had changed, both of them in ways they could never have predicted. And you, Nathan, she asked, shifting the focus of the conversation. How was your life after here? He hesitated. He rarely talked about his personal journey, preferring that people see only the end result. The successful, confident, respected entrepreneur. It wasn't easy, he began, feeling that he owed her at least a glimpse of his truth. The first years in New York were lonely. I carried so much resentment, so much anger. Nathan told about his initial isolation, the fear of forming new friendships, the dread of being again the target of ridicule. My mother noticed what was happening and took me to a psychologist. It was he who suggested the support of a nutritionist and personal trainer, not just for the weight issue, but as part of a broader process of rebuilding self-esteem. He explained how gradually he emerged from that protective shell he had created. College brought new friends, new perspectives. The development of the app that gave rise to his company came almost by chance during a university project. But you know what the real transformation was? He asked, looking directly into her eyes. It wasn't losing weight or becoming successful. It was realizing that my worth didn't depend on anyone's validation. Emily held his gaze, a silent tear running down her face. I would give everything to go back and do things differently, Nathan. I wouldn't, he replied, surprising her. As painful as it was, that experience shaped me. I don't know if I would be who I am today without that suffering. He paused, which doesn't mean it was fair or right, just that it's part of my story. They sat in silence for a few moments, each absorbing the other's revelations. Can you "Forgive me?" she asked finally, her voice almost a whisper. Nathan reflected before answering. He didn't want to offer empty words or an easy absolution. "I think forgiveness is a process, not an event," he said carefully. "It begins with understanding, with humanizing the other. Today, for the first time, I see you as a complete person, with your own pains and struggles, not just as the girl who hurt me." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "I can't promise that everything is forgiven and forgotten. These things take time, but I can say that I'm open to that process." Emily nodded, discreetly wiping away her tears. "It's more than I deserve," she said. "Thank you." The conversation flowed to lighter topics after that. They discovered common interests that they would never have imagined in adolescence. Both loved Russian literature, had a passion for independent cinema, and had become cooking enthusiasts. When they finally looked at the clock, they realized it was already past noon. "I need to go," said Nathan, checking the messages on his cell phone. "I have an important video conference at 2 p.m. Emily nodded, picking up her purse. "How much longer are you staying in Boston?" "My flight to New York is tomorrow afternoon," he replied. A silence laden with unexpressed possibilities hung between them. "Nathan, she began hesitantly. "Yes?" "Would you like to have dinner with me tonight?" she asked, the words coming out quickly. "I know a great place near the Esplanade. Nothing formal, just continuing our conversation." Nathan felt a mix of emotions. Part of him still kept his guard up, fearful of lowering it completely. But another part, perhaps the braver one, was curious about this new Emily and about the possibility of rewriting that story with a different ending. "I would like that," he replied finally. Her smile was genuine, lighting up her eyes in a way he had never seen. They paid the bill and left the bakery together. On the sidewalk there was a moment of uncertainty about how to say goodbye. "See you later then," she said, extending her hand. Nathan accepted the gesture, and something unexpected happened when their hands touched. He felt not the echo of the old pain, but the promise of something new, still undefined, but with potential to be meaningful. "See you later," he replied. As he walked back to the hotel, Nathan realized he felt lighter, as if a weight he had carried for years had begun to dissipate. Not completely. Some scars would never fully disappear, but enough to allow him to glimpse the future without the shadows of the past clouding his vision. His phone vibrated with a message from Tyler. "So, how was coffee with Emily?" Nathan smiled, not knowing exactly how to summarize what had just happened. After a few moments of reflection, he typed, "Endings, beginnings, and perhaps new beginnings." 6 months passed since that reunion in Boston. What began as a weekend visit became a routine, alternating flights between New York and Boston, long video calls during the week, messages exchanged at any time of day. Nathan and Emily built, with patience and care, something that neither had experienced before. A relationship based on honesty, understanding, and above all, mutual respect. It wasn't a path without obstacles. Sometimes, during a trivial discussion, the ghost of the past would unexpectedly resurface. An apparently innocent comment would bring back the memory of an old humiliation, and Nathan would find himself momentarily back in those school corridors, vulnerable and hurt. Emily had learned to recognize these moments, giving him the necessary space, never minimizing his pain. With time, these episodes became rarer, the shadows of the past gradually losing their power over the present. On a Sunday afternoon, while walking through Central Park in New York, Emily revealed important news. "I received an offer to direct the marketing department at the New York branch of the company." Nathan looked at her, surprised and happy. "That's wonderful. Are you going to accept it?" "I'm seriously thinking about it," she replied. "It would be a great professional opportunity, and also..." She left the sentence hanging in the air, its implications obvious to both. "And also we would be in the same city," completed Nathan, smiling. "Exactly." Emily intertwined her fingers with his. "I don't want to rush things, but I feel like we're ready for this step." Nathan nodded, feeling a quiet certainty. Their relationship had evolved naturally, without pressures or unrealistic expectations. They knew each other's flaws, insecurities, fears, and chose to be together anyway, or perhaps exactly because of that. 2 weeks later, Nathan was helping Emily unload the last boxes in her new apartment in Soho, not far from where he lived. "It's strange to think how it all started," she commented as they organized books on the shelf. "If someone had told me a year ago that I would be here today..." "Life has a peculiar sense of humor," agreed Nathan. "Sometimes the most unlikely endings are the ones that make the most sense." That night, they had dinner on the balcony of Emily's apartment, contemplating the city lights. Between laughter and conversations, they celebrated not just the new beginning, but also the journey that had brought them there. "You know what surprises me the most?" said Nathan, observing Emily with a look that mingled admiration and affection. "It's not the fact that we're together, but how natural this seems now." "As if the universe knew something we didn't," she completed. "Exactly." Later, as he returned home, Nathan reflected on the strange paths that life takes. He thought about the humiliated teenager he once was, the determined man he had transformed into, and finally, the person he was becoming now, someone capable not only of forgiving, but also of loving deeply. He took from his pocket the small, velvet box he had been carrying for days, opening it to admire the engagement ring he had carefully chosen. It wasn't yet the ideal moment for the proposal. Both had agreed to take things slow, but the certainty grew within him each day. His phone vibrated with a message from Emily. "Thank you for today, for everything, actually." Nathan smiled, typing the response. "Thank you for showing me that some stories deserve to be rewritten." The next day, during a meeting with investors, one of the youngest businessmen at the table asked Nathan what had been the secret of his success. "Persistence? Strategic vision?" suggested the young man. Nathan thought for a moment before answering. "Believing. In transformations. People change, circumstances change, we ourselves change. And when we embrace that truth instead of fighting against it, we discover possibilities we never imagined." As he spoke, he thought about everything he had experienced. The bullying he had suffered, the isolation, the physical transformation, the professional success, and finally, the reunion that had changed everything. Each chapter of that story had been essential in shaping who he was now. That night, when meeting Emily for dinner, Nathan found himself observing her with new eyes. He no longer saw either the cruel teenager from the past or the remorseful woman from the reunion. He simply saw Emily, complex, imperfect, constantly evolving, exactly like himself. And in that moment, he understood that the true miracle wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation, but the human capacity for transformation, for abandoning old versions of oneself and being reborn repeatedly into something new and better. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she asked with a curious smile. "I'm just grateful," he replied, holding her hand across the table. "For all the versions we've been and for all we'll still be." Emily squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with mutual understanding. They didn't need more words. The past was there, an integral part of their stories, but it no longer determined their future. It was merely the prologue to a much richer and more complex narrative they continued to write together, one day at a time. Dear listeners, we hope that Nathan and Emily's journey has touched your hearts. This story of transformation, forgiveness, and new beginnings reminds us that our scars from the past don't need to define who we are, but can strengthen us for a brighter future. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about overcoming and second chances. Find it here by clicking to your left. If you identified with any aspect of this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give the video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and human relationships. What did you think of the ending? Do you believe in the power of personal transformations? Tell us in the comments and share your own stories of new beginnings. We're eager to know them.